The day I found my husband's original will hidden inside a hollowed-out Bible in the back of my son's fiancée's closet. I finally understood why she had worked so quietly and so carefully to make sure I would not be at that wedding at all. Not late to the wedding. Not uninvited. Gone. She didn't want me embarrassed or overlooked or pushed to a side table with the distant cousins. She wanted me erased. From the wedding, yes, but more than that. From the estate, from the trust, from 26 years of a life my late husband and I built together from absolutely nothing. And she had come terrifyingly close to pulling it off. 4 days before my son stood at that altar, I found the document that changed everything. And I want to tell you exactly what happened because it matters that you understand how these things work. How someone can smile at your face at Sunday dinners for 3 years, call you mom, squeeze your hand at your husband's funeral, and be quietly, methodically, legally dismantling everything he left behind. I'm going to tell you the whole story, from the beginning. And if you're new here, I share stories like this every single day. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the moment they find out. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that for 26 years, I was a wife, a partner, a woman who worked alongside her husband, a man named Gerald, as he built a small commercial real estate business in a mid-sized city in the Midwest. We weren't wealthy in the way people imagine when they hear the word wealthy. We didn't vacation in Europe or drive foreign cars. We drove American trucks and reinvested everything every year for over 2 decades. By the time Gerald was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the spring of 2019, we had 4 properties, 2 strip mall buildings, 1 small warehouse, and the house we'd lived in for 21 years. We had a family trust that Gerald had set up with our estate attorney back in 2011. And we had 1 son. I'll call him my son, because that's what he is mine even on the days I didn't recognize him. Gerald passed in October of 2019. He was 63 years old. And within 6 months of his funeral, my son brought home the woman I will call his fiancée. Now I want to be fair, because fairness is important to me. It's what separates us from the people in this story who had none. When I first met her, I thought she was sharp, attentive. She asked about Gerald. She asked about the business. She asked how I was managing the properties alone. I told her I had a property manager. She nodded thoughtfully. She seemed genuinely interested. I understand now what kind of interest that was. Within 8 months of meeting my son, she had moved into his apartment. Within 14 months, she had a ring. Within 22 months, there was a wedding date set June of 2022. And in all of that time, not one single alarm bell rang. Not because I was naive. I am not a naive woman, but because she was that careful. There was one moment, just one, that I should have paid more attention to. About a year after they got together, she mentioned, very casually over dinner, that she had a friend who worked in estate planning. "Such interesting work," she said. She looked at me when she said it, just for a second, just long enough to be a question. I didn't answer it. I should have. Incident 1, the appraisal I was never told about. The first sign that something was wrong came in August of 2021, 10 months before the wedding date. My property manager called me on a Tuesday afternoon to let me know that an appraiser had walked through the warehouse property that previous Friday. He assumed I had authorized it. I had not. When I called my son to ask about it, he told me, very calmly, that his fiancée had suggested it might be good to get a current picture of what things are worth, given how the real estate market had shifted. He said he'd mentioned it to the property manager as a courtesy and that he should have looped me in. He apologized. He sounded genuine. The appraisal value, as I later found out, came in at $1.2 million for the warehouse alone. At the time, I filed it away as overstepping, overenthusiastic. I told myself she was just trying to be helpful. I told myself my son would have told me if there was anything to worry about. I told myself a lot of things that year. Incident 2, the trust document she asked to borrow. In December of 2021, 6 months before the wedding, she and my son came to the house for the holidays. While I was in the kitchen on Christmas Eve, she asked if she could use my husband's old office to make a call. I said, of course. She was in there for about 45 minutes. 3 days after Christmas, I went into Gerald's office to pull out some tax records, and I noticed that the file drawer, the one I kept unlocked, because Gerald had always kept it unlocked, was slightly out of alignment, like it had been pulled all the way out and put back. I checked the files. The original copy of the family trust document was there, but a set of the stapled exhibit pages, the schedules that listed the properties and their values at the time of the trust's creation, was loose, like it had been removed and replaced rather than simply leafed through. I told myself I must have left it that way. I told myself my memory was playing tricks. I was wrong on both counts. Incident 3, the attorney I'd never heard of. In February of 2022, 4 months before the wedding, I received a letter. It was addressed to me by name, from an attorney's office I had never heard of, in a city 2 hours away. The letter was brief. It stated that the firm represented interested parties in the estate of Gerald, and that they were in the process of reviewing the validity of certain instruments. They requested that I make no transfers, sales, or encumbrances on any property held in the family trust, pending the outcome of their review. I stood in my kitchen and read that letter 3 times. I called my own attorney, the estate attorney who had drafted the trust with Gerald back in 2011. His name was Martin, and he had known us for 30 years. I read him the letter over the phone. There was a silence on his end that I will never forget. Then he said, "Margaret," he always called me Margaret, "I think you need to come in." When I met with Martin the following week, he told me that someone had recently filed a request with the probate court to examine the trust on the grounds that Gerald may have lacked full mental capacity at the time certain amendments were made in 2018. A 2018 amendment had added a specific instruction that, in the event of my son's marriage, the trust's assets would not be considered marital property and would remain solely under my management until my own death. That amendment was a protection Gerald had put in place on his own. I hadn't even known about it until that meeting. Someone was trying to get it thrown out. Martin and I both knew who. Incident 4, the conversation at the rehearsal dinner, planning meeting. 1 month before the wedding, May of 2022. My son had asked me to join them for a dinner to plan the rehearsal dinner logistics, venue, seating, timing. We met at a restaurant, the 3 of us, and the conversation started normally. Menu choices, guest count. Then my future daughter-in-law set a piece of paper on the table. It was a seating chart, and on it my seat was placed at a table in the back corner of the room, a table that seated the florist, the photographer's assistant, and 2 people I had never heard of. Not at the head table, not near my son, in the corner. I looked at the chart for a long moment, then I looked up at her. She smiled at me. It was a very specific smile, patient, almost pitying, the smile of a person who believes they have already won. "We just thought it might be less stressful for you," she said. "You've been through so much." My son did not look at me when she said it. I folded the seating chart, put it in my purse, and said, "Of course, whatever makes the evening run smoothly." She nodded. She seemed satisfied. I drove home, went into Gerald's office, and sat in his chair for a very long time. It was a Tuesday, 4 days before the wedding, June 7th, 2022. My son had asked me to drop off a box of items he'd stored at my house, some of Gerald's cuff links he wanted to wear at the ceremony, a framed photo of Gerald and him from his college graduation that he'd asked me to bring. He was at work. She was at work. He'd left a key under the mat and asked me to just let myself in and leave the box on the kitchen counter. I want you to understand something. I was not snooping. I was not suspicious. I was a mother dropping off a box of her late husband's belongings for her son's wedding. I was grieving, quietly, in the way that you grieve at these milestones when the person you wanted beside you is gone. I set the box on the counter, and I stood there for a moment in their kitchen. There was a jacket hanging over a kitchen chair, her jacket, and from the inside pocket, the corner of something was visible, a folded piece of paper, and on the folded edge, I could see the name of an attorney's office printed in small letters. The same attorney's office from the letter I'd received in February. I should have left, I know that. I should have set the box down and walked out. I didn't. I unfolded the paper. It was a memo, internal to the law firm, 3 pages, and it outlined in plain, clinical legal language the plan. The 2018 amendment would be challenged on the basis of a doctor's note from Gerald's oncologist, obtained through a medical records request, suggesting that Gerald had been prescribed a high-dose pain medication in October of 2018, around the time the amendment was signed. The argument would be that he was not competent. The amendment would be struck. The protection it provided, the one that kept the trust solely under my management, would disappear. And at that point, as Gerald's sole heir, my son would become a co-trustee. And as his wife, under the laws of our state, she would have standing to petition for her own involvement. The memo was dated January 2022. It had been in progress for 5 months before I received that first letter. It had been in progress since before Christmas, when she was alone in Gerald's office for 45 minutes. I stood in their kitchen, and I read all 3 pages twice. I was very, very calm. And that is when I noticed the other document. On the kitchen table, underneath a wedding magazine and a stack of vendor receipts, there was a Bible. An old one, dark green cover, gold lettering. I recognized it immediately. It had been Gerald's mother's Bible. I had given it to my son years ago. It had been in a box of Gerald's things that I'd brought over the previous fall. I don't know why I picked it up. Something made me. The Bible had been hollowed out. Not the whole thing, just a section in the middle, neat, precise, like someone had taken their time. And inside that hollow was a document. It was Gerald's original will, not the updated version filed with probate. The original from 2009, before the trust, before the amendments, before everything. A will that predated every legal instrument Gerald had put in place to protect our assets, our home, our 26 years. There was a sticky note attached to it in her handwriting, 2 words and a question mark. Still valid. And beneath that, in different ink, what appeared to be a response from someone. I assumed the attorney 2 words in reply. Possibly, argue. I took photographs of every page of both documents. I put the Bible back exactly as I found it, tucked under the magazine. I picked up my purse. I walked out. I locked the door. I sat in my car for 11 minutes. Then I called Martin. Martin answered on the second ring. I told him calmly and precisely what I had found. I told him about the memo, the hollow Bible, the sticky note. I told him about the attorney's name on the document. While I spoke, Martin was quiet and I could hear him writing. When I finished, he said, "Don't call your son tonight. Don't call her. Don't change anything in the house. Go home and get me those photographs first thing tomorrow morning." I said, "All right." He said, "Margaret, you did exactly right." I drove home. I made dinner. I did not cry, which surprised me. What I felt was not grief, and it was not anger. It was something colder and quieter than either of those things. It was clarity. The kind you only get when you have been uncertain for a long time, and suddenly you are not uncertain anymore. The next morning, Wednesday, 4 days before the wedding, I was in Martin's office at 8 a.m. He reviewed the photographs on my phone and immediately contacted a colleague of his, a litigator named Patricia who specialized in trust and estate disputes. Patricia had 30 years of experience and a reputation that, as Martin put it, precedes her into every courtroom in the state. She looked at the photographs and within 40 minutes had identified 3 separate causes of action. First, the original 2009 will had been superseded by the trust and could not be legitimately argued as valid. The fact that someone was holding it and asking an attorney to explore whether it was still valid suggested either ignorance or bad faith. Patricia suspected the latter. Second, the challenge to the 2018 amendment was weak. Gerald's oncologist Martin had treated him as well and knew the doctor personally had never made any formal assessment of competency, and the pain medication referenced in the memo was prescribed after the amendment was signed, not before. Someone had reversed the dates in their summary. That, Patricia said, was not a mistake. That was fabrication. Third, the unauthorized appraisal of the warehouse property, combined with the memo's explicit discussion of the property values, suggested possible preparation for a fraudulent conveyance claim an attempt to argue that Gerald had transferred property into the trust specifically to disadvantage potential future heirs, namely, my son's future wife. Patricia filed a protective motion with the probate court that same afternoon, Wednesday, June 8th. The motion placed a legal hold on any challenges to the trust pending a full review. It also formally put the opposing attorney's firm on notice that we were aware of their activities and that any further actions without proper court authorization would be met with sanctions. She also sent a letter formal, measured, ice cold to the opposing firm informing them that their client's possession of Gerald's original will and the documented inquiry into its validity would be reported to the state bar if that document was not surrendered to the court within 72 hours. It was surrendered within 24. I did not go to the rehearsal dinner Thursday night. I called my son that Thursday afternoon. I told him I wasn't feeling well and that I would see him at the ceremony. He sounded distracted. He said, of course, that he hoped I felt better. I heard her voice in the background. I heard him tell her what I'd said. And I heard her say she didn't know I was still on the line. Good. That's easier. My son said, "She can probably hear you." A pause. "That's fine," she said. I hung up the phone. I went to bed at 9 o'clock that Thursday evening. I slept better than I had in months. On Friday morning, the day before the wedding, Patricia called me. She told me that the probate court had reviewed the protective motion and had assigned a hearing date. She told me that the opposing firm had made inquiries that morning to Martin, directly essentially asking whether there was any way to resolve this informally. Patricia advised me not to respond. "They know they're exposed," she said. "Let them sit with that." I did not attend the wedding. I know that sounds cold. It is not the thing a person is supposed to do. But I want to be honest with you, because honesty is the whole point of telling this story. I did not trust myself to sit in that church and watch my son marry a woman who had spent 3 years quietly and patiently trying to take everything Gerald and I had built. I did not trust that I could sit in the back corner, in the seat she had chosen for me, and be gracious about it. And I had worked too hard, in those 4 days, to be strategic and composed. I was not going to risk it on ceremony. My son called me that evening after the reception. He was not angry exactly. He was confused, which was almost worse. I told him we needed to talk. I told him there was something he needed to know about. He said all right. We made a plan to meet the following week. That was the hardest part of all of this. Not the legal strategy, not the documents or the courtrooms or the attorney's fees. The hardest part was deciding what kind of mother I was going to be through all of it. The probate hearing was held in September of 2022, 3 months after the wedding. Patricia presented the case in full. The fabricated date discrepancy in the memo was central. The opposing attorney had no good explanation for it and visibly struggled when the judge asked him to address it directly. The hollow Bible and the sticky note asking whether the original will was still valid was submitted as evidence of what Patricia called a coordinated scheme to misrepresent the decedent's estate for personal financial gain. The judge was a woman in her late 60s. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she read every page of every document herself before she asked a single question. I appreciated that. The challenge to the 2018 amendment was dismissed entirely. The fabricated date issue was referred to the state bar for disciplinary review of the opposing attorney. The original 2009 will was formally declared superseded and was destroyed by court order. The family trust was confirmed intact, in full, under my sole management as Gerald had intended. The 4 properties, the 2 strip mall buildings, the warehouse, the house remained in the trust. Their combined current market value at the time of the hearing was assessed at approximately $3.1 million. Every dollar of it stayed where Gerald had put it. She and my son were married. They remain married. I have had very few conversations with her since September of 2022, and the ones I have had have been brief and polite, which is the best I can manage. My son and I had a long conversation the week after the hearing. It was not easy. He had not known the full extent of what she had done. I believe that, mostly. But he had allowed himself not to look too hard. He had allowed himself to be comfortable with the appraisal he hadn't mentioned, with the attorney letters he'd never brought up. He had chosen a seating chart that put me in a corner, and he had not said a word. I told him all of that. He cried. I did not. There is a version of this story where that conversation fixed everything and we are closer than ever. We are not. We are careful with each other, the way you are with something that has cracked and been mended. It holds, but you know where the line is. Gerald's mother's Bible, the one she'd hollowed out, was returned to me by the court. I kept it, not because of what she used it for, because it was Gerald's mother's and it belonged with me. I sat with it one evening in October after everything was settled. I sat in Gerald's chair in his office with the Bible in my lap, the hollow in the middle of it, the shape of what had been hidden there. I thought about what Gerald would say if he knew. I think he would not have been surprised, the way I was. Gerald had a knack for seeing people clearly from the beginning. He always said the trust wasn't just about the money. It was about making sure that what we built lasted. That it went where it was supposed to go. That no one could just walk in, smile the right way, and take it. He was right. He usually was. Everything is quiet now. The properties are managed well. The trust is sound. I am a woman in my late 60s with a clear legal record, a very good attorney, and the knowledge that I did exactly what Gerald would have wanted me to do when it mattered most. I did not yell. I did not confront. I did not make a scene at a wedding or a rehearsal dinner or a holiday meal. I simply went to the right person with the right documents at the right time. And I waited. That is how it's done. If this story stayed with you, if you felt something sitting with it, please share it. There are women watching right now who are in the middle of their own version of this. They are sitting in offices receiving letters they don't understand, or they are folding seating charts and putting them in their purses with quiet, dignified fury. They need to know that patience is not weakness. That calm is not surrender. That waiting for the right moment is its own kind of power. I'll be here tomorrow with another story. Subscribe, hit the bell, and don't let anyone put you in the corner.